Well, in some ways, the subject tonight is humility, and I feel humbled by such a generous introduction. Thank you, Bernhard, for your friendship and collaboration in this endeavor, and Kate for joining us in pulling this fascinating conference together, and to all of you who are schooling me in all sorts of new ways and phenomena. It's been a great time already, and I'm kind of like the kid in the candy shop, just learning and listening to all of you. So despite a long day, I'm quite stimulated and ready to go. And so I think I will jump in. But I should also, honestly, I should thank all the sponsors here, including the Leibniz Institute, for their generous willingness to put up with me as a senior research fellow, which is another great privilege in my life and career. Well, since yesterday, we have been wrestling with whether the notion of dark green religion might help to illuminate nature-human entanglements in Europe. Tonight, I pose the question, are some museums expressing and promoting dark green spiritualities and values? Because not everyone here is already acquainted with the book, I will briefly introduce my approach and argument. Now, for today's talk to make sense, I need to summarize my argument and explain what I mean by Gaian animism. I'm going to begin by underscoring that DGR, or dark green religion, is an analytic construct, a mode of analysis. In DGR, I sought to analyze what I call the environmental milieu, namely the social places where people are engaged with environmental issues. I suggested that within this milieu, there is a significant convergence towards certain understandings about the human place in the world and our responsibilities to it. The characteristics involved are sometimes obviously religious, involving perceptions of immaterial divine beings or forces. Other times they're naturalistic and secular, but nevertheless they are religion resembling. Whether obviously or ambiguously religious or avowedly not religious, I have argued that there's a complex of perceptions, values, and practices that these diverse actors share that can be illuminated as a dark green or religious or spiritual worldview. Now, whether anyone wants in the final analysis to call the social phenomena I am analyzing religion will depend on whether they think there's some essence to religion, such as a belief in invisible beings or forces. I'm uninterested in settling where religion ends and that which is not religion begins. With scores of definition, that is an impossible quest. But using the tools of the social sciences and humanities to analyze religion resembling phenomena can significantly illuminate our world. What then are the traits that characterize dark green religion? Dark green spiritualities typically stress ecological interdependence and mutual dependence, involve deep feelings of belonging and connection to nature, and express beliefs that the biosphere is a sacred, Gaia-like superorganism. These spiritualities often also have animistic dimensions in which people think that communication or even communion with non-human organisms is possible. Importantly, dark green spiritualities generally cohere with and draw on an evolutionary and ecological worldview, and therefore stress continuity and kinship among all organisms. This chart emphasizes that both animistic and Gaian perceptions can involve beliefs in divine entities or forces, or they can be entirely naturalistic, rooted in the sciences, or personal experiences with non-human organisms. In addition to these animistic and Gaian perceptions, I've argued that the following characteristics are also typical of dark green spiritualities. These include perceptions that nature is sacred, its value is not only indirect by virtue of having been divinely created, and that all living things have intrinsic value, all life shares a common ancestor, and thus are kin, literally biologically related. All life is interconnected, and these perceptions are woven in with deep feelings of belonging and connection to nature, a corresponding humility about the human place in the world, and such spiritualities typically also involve perceptions that death is not to be feared, but accepted as the necessary wellspring of new life. Also common are experiences of awe, wonder, and ultimately a love of nature. These experiences are the common traits that I've identified as I wander the world looking at everything from grassroots environmental movement to things occurring under the United Nations umbrella, and as you'll see tonight, at art and science museums around the world. Now, dark green religion also shares certain epistemological premises. In other words, they share the view that there are a variety of ways that one can arrive at a proper spiritual perception, including, and most importantly, direct sensory experience in nature, science, which displaces human beings from the center of the universe, and the arts, which can evoke similar perceptions. In DGR, I argued that although such spiritualities are nascent and relatively small compared to the world's predominant religions, they're gaining adherence and cultural traction around the world, promoting pro-environmental policies and behaviors, and exercising at least some political influence. Moreover, I suggested these nature spiritualities, which are developing and embracing evolutionary and ecological worldviews, are more likely to kindle dramatic environmental mobilization than are the world's long-standing religious traditions. And in the book, I documented how such understandings are being expressed and promoted not only by environmental activists, but by a wild diversity of individuals and groups, including mountaineers, surfers, gardeners, permaculturalists, musicians, filmmakers, nature writers, literary critics, psychonauts, astronauts, scientists, and artists. And while I did not dwell on this much in my book, I could easily have turned the analytic lens on my contemporary scholars, many of whom are also promoting dark green themes in their work, including this weekend a little bit anyway, including eco-critics, neo-materialists, neo-animists, philosophers, ethologists, multi-species ethnographers, and diverse thinkers promoting enchantment, rewilding, indigenous spiritualities, ecological resistance, degrowth, and the rights of nature. And turning to our theme tonight, I have found that many museum and aquarium curators draw on the work of many of the just mentioned cultural creatives and scientists, fusing diverse approaches and perspectives in what I surmise is an attempt to inspire awe, wonder, and even reverence for nature. But first, a few qualifications. Although I'm confident that my dark green construction has explanatory power, tonight I'm not arguing that art and science museums are universally promoting such views. Rather, I contend that many art and science museums regularly express dark green themes. But these museums are not systematically promoting all the themes I consider to represent the dark green cultural complex. Such a systematic presentation is constrained by at least two limits of the genre. Museums must simplify present complex and present complex ideas within the constraints of limited funds and space. The need to orchestrate the flow of human bodies through the venues, while also anticipating the range of visitor attention spans. Moreover, those creating exhibitions have differing views and values, some more dark green than others, no doubt, as well as different personalities and power relations. Nevertheless, curators regularly present and promote dark green themes. The extent to which museums, or some of them, or certain exhibitions featured in them are dark green, I will leave to your own judgments, and perhaps to your future explorations of such human nature-related creativity. Questions to ponder when considering if there are dark green religions are, what are the curators trying to get visitors to think and feel? What do you think visitors think and feel when they're at these museums? And what would you think and feel if you were there? I begin with the National Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City, which in complicated ways is entangled with European empires and their religions and sciences. Out front is Tlaloc, the god of rain and fertility, who is worshipped and feared for his control not only of rain and fertility, but of the destructive forces of nature, such as hail and lightning. Its most prominent exhibit introduced the discipline of anthropology. The first panel explained the age of the earth, the second, the evolutionary process. The third included these words. Thus, anthropology, through the study of fossil remains and modern primates, can trace the evolutionary relationships, presenting a mirror that reminds us that we are a part of the history of the world and the animal kingdom, and not, as we had believed, that we were created to have nature at our service. Underscoring the connection between humans and the rest of the animal kingdom was a display of Australopithecus afarensis, an early bipedal hominid whom scientists consider a human ancestor. Here and elsewhere, the museum curators articulated the view that humans are animals and that all organisms share a common ancestor. This was the basis as well for the exhibit's explicit criticism of anthropocentric arrogance and the false earlier view that nature was created only for humans. The perceptive visitor would recognize that colonial religions were being criticized for promoting precisely such destructive misperception. The idea and value of traditional ecological knowledge was explained, and its interrelatedness with the pagan nature spirituality that yet survives in Mesoamerican indigenous communities was acknowledged and portrayed sympathetically. The museum thus blended contemporary biocultural understandings, national pride, and a subtle anti-colonial and anti-theist perspective, while also implicitly expressing the notion that nature has intrinsic value. Reverence for Gaia and kinship feelings toward non-human organisms is being expressed and promoted around the world at a host of natural history museums and planetariums, including this Shrine to Darwin and the Evolutionary Story in London, and at the Hayden Planetarium in New York City, where curators give this reverence a cosmological spin. The planetarium includes the Hall of the Universe, a Big Bang theater, and a cosmic pathway. Outside the Big Bang theater, visitors can read about the origin of the universe, and inside the theater, experience it more viscerally. After learning about the Big Bang, one can walk the cosmic pathway, which provides a pilgrimage through time. This reveals that humans are latecomers in the story of evolution and the universe, thus dethroning humanity from the center of the cosmological story. By doing so, the exhibition promotes humility about the human place in the cosmos. The adjacent Earth and Space Museum also decenters humanity from the center of the story by illustrating how people used to think the Earth was the center of the universe. Now, the display explains, we understand that we reside in one tiny planet in the midst of an unfathomable number of galaxies. The point about our tiny place in space was driven home when on February 14th, 1990, at the urging of the astronomer Carl Sagan, NASA's Voyager 1 satellite took this picture from the edge of our solar system. In this photograph, Earth appears on the pale blue dot next to the brighter, near vertical band of cosmic light. 4 years later, in 1994, Sagan published a pale blue dot with this picture on its cover. Sagan even claimed, "Science has far surpassed religion in delivering awe." Indeed, for many, awe rooted in science is a pathway to religion, or at least to meaning and reverence for nature. The Hall of Human Origins at New York City's American Museum of Natural History further exemplifies how curators use diverse sculptures, images, and interpretive panels to teach biological kinship. This display shows that given their evolutionary proximity, 98.8% of human DNA is the same as chimpanzees. Indeed, a host of organisms share family resemblances. For example, by showing the similarity between their appendages. The adjacent text stated, "All living things, from people to butterflies to mushrooms, are related to one another. Both humans and birds have eyes, for example. This is a homology, a feature that two different living things inherit from a common ancestor." The nearby Hall of Biodiversity has many aesthetically pleasing displays of Earth's diverse organisms. This venue includes nature-reverencing aphorisms penned by famous scientists, artists, and activists, all expressing kinship and promoting conservation. Near Johannesburg, South Africa, several museums focus on Australopithecus fossils that were found near the Sterkfontein caves, which have been labeled the cradle of humankind and a World Heritage Site. These museums trace the evolutionary story from its beginnings to the emergence of Homo sapiens in Africa to the present. Here are some images from the site. At the Sterkfontein Museum, again, we find timeless timelines showing humans as latecomers to the cosmological as well as the biological story. People are urged to discover their true selves, which means their animal selves and deep relationships with all other beings. The displays explain that we evolved from Australopithecines, developed into the genus Homo, and eventually emerged as modern humans some 400,000 years ago in Africa. The curators again quoted famous scientists, including Carl Sagan, and here to the right, Charles Darwin's famous prose about there being grandeur in an evolutionary understanding of the origin and diversity of life. Outside, pride for the African continent is blended with a humanism grounded in an evolutionary understanding. As it says here, all of humanity shares an African heritage, and we are one diverse species. To make sure nobody would miss the point, inside the theme was repeated in very big letters. Now, this is a common theme at science museums around the world. The museum adjacent the caves also promoted the Gaia theory as a way to stress the interdependence of Earth's living systems. The Two Oceans Aquarium in Cape Town, South Africa, presents similar messages. It does so, however, in an overtly spiritual way. Its credo, that the ocean is sacred, greets visitors immediately upon entry, while adjacent banners declare that whales are central to the reawakening of our spiritually connected place within the living universe. Here, kinship is not only with whales, but with the entire living universe. Other panels spotlighted our dependence on biodiversity and quoted environmental luminaries such as Rachel Carson's statement expressing wonder toward nature and urging humility. This panel also averred that evolution, as well as many traditional societies, teach ecological interdependence. This panel, on living within a wilder world, asserted that understanding our kinship with and sense of belonging to nature is rooted in our common ancestry. This is also why we find peace and tranquility in nature, the panel explained. Many museums urge people to pursue sensory experiences in nature. This panel, for example, urged visitors to connect to nature through a meditative sensory journey into nature to experience the timeless processes that sustain and nourish all life on Earth. Can such exhortations be considered a call to nature-venerating ritual? This panel asks visitors to recognize their kinship with other lives who have the same needs as our own. In my view, the curators constructed the entire aquarium to shape perception, to help people experience the wonder and the sacredness of nature, while also calling for action to defend whales and the ocean itself. Here is the anti-apartheid activist and Nobel Peace Prize winner, the late Archbishop Tutu, launching the Sacred Oceans campaign. He asserted that the African notion of Ubuntu, a principle of interconnection, demands an end to whale hunting. Indeed, curators around the world, as shown in this further example from the Monterey Bay Aquarium in California, often seek to arouse feelings of kinship and belonging to nature. Its entrance exhorts visitors to connect to the animals, plants, and habitats of the bay, and in the first wing of the aquarium, visitors are greeted by this aphorism from the American nature writer Terry Tempest Williams. Wildness reminds us what it means to be human, what we are connected to rather than what we are separate from. While the open sea wing draws visitors in with mesmerizing displays of artistically lighted jellyfish accompanied by mystical music. Their exotic wonders you can view tonight, if you wish, by going to their Jellycam online. Dark green exemplar Henry David Thoreau then wooed visitors with his statement about wildness preserving the world, which flows into the aquarium's largest tank and conveys something of the wild world's magic. Before turning to Europe, I cannot resist the temptation to mention how for some, surfing is a ritualized practice leading to perceptions that nature is sacred and worthy of reverent care. When I published a scholarly article to this effect, the world's most widely distributed surfing magazines excerpted or drew on my analysis, as shown in these magazine covers from the USA and England, as well as this Brazilian surfing magazine, Alma Surf. Every time surfing magazine editors did this, they added their own confession that they consider surfing to be their religion. In Brazil, the article also inspired the theme of a 2012 surf festival. Indeed, since the Duke Kahanamoku introduced the Hawaiian practice to the world in the early 20th century, it has spread internationally and increasingly assumed a spiritual and environmentalist dimension. As with the Anthropology Museum, one can find evidence of such cultural production in museums and other places the sport is represented. At the Huntington Beach Surfing Museum, the Duke is celebrated as the patron saint of the modern sport of surfing, bringing an indigenous aloha spirit to the practice. The Surfing Heritage Museum in San Clemente, California, and the commercial surfing industry as well have even begun talking about surfboards as sacred craft, implicitly recognizing that surfboards are technologies of the sacred, means to liminal experiences of belonging and connection to Mother Ocean. Indeed, increasingly, surfers speak of their connection to Mother Ocean, and surfer artists promote protective actions. And scores of surfer environmentalist organizations have proliferated and spread, including the Surfrider Foundation and Surfers for Cetaceans and the avowedly deep ecological Surfers Environmental Alliance. The Groundswell Society itself celebrates indigenous cultures and their connection to the sea and also promotes ecocentric ethics and kinship with all life. Continuing with oceanic examples, but turning directly to Europe, I recently visited the aquarium in Bergen, Norway, just last month. The very first panel confronts visitors with David Attenborough's statement declaring that we have a responsibility to protect our blue planet. There, I met with Solveig Westerli, who is the project manager at the aquarium. When I asked Solveig what he hoped his exhibitions would do after mentioning educating visitors about marine ecosystems, he stressed that he wants to awaken awe and wonder toward the world's ocean and empathy toward marine organisms. As he put it, he seeks to provide a wow experience. He also seeks to inspire pro-environmental action and hope by showing solutions to environmental challenges. These objectives were reflected in the aquarium's displays, as here, where visitors are urged to make friends with marine organisms. In many ways, the aquarium pointed out similarities between our own species and marine organisms, even in the washroom, with a note to remember to wash your fingers, your flippers, paws, and hands, whatever they happen to be. And in this display on your right, about marine organisms, mentioning that, like us, they communicate with sound. The curators also urged children to become superhero advocates for our oceans. Finally, the announcement of a huge new aquarium that will soon be built in Bergen, it's going to cost $300 million, explained that its mission is to cultivate a love of the ocean, just as Solveig had said. Before taking up his position at the aquarium, Solveig had been a curator at the Bergen Natural History Museum. There, he updated an exhibition in the museum's whale hall, working with David Rothenberg, who a number of you know fondly, an American environmental philosopher of Norwegian ancestry. Rothenberg had been a collaborator with the Norwegian philosopher Arne Naess, who had famously advanced the philosophy of deep ecology, which asserted that nature has an intrinsic value and a right to flourish. Rothenberg is also a musician who blends his music with the songs of whales, birds, and other organisms. At the now updated whale hall, visitors hear whale song blended with Rothenberg's music. The blended sounds suggest a melodic affinity, a harmonious possibility of kinship with whales. The next day at the Bergen Art Museum, I attended Earthworks, a special exhibition that, according to the curators, provides diverse perspectives from artists, writers, and activists who exemplify ecological resistance movements in Nordic countries. The exhibition included this sculpture through which stones declared, "If you stay numb, you won't get involved." And then the sky plaintively asked, "Are you going to just watch the destruction?" The Earthworks curators stocked the museum gift shop with books written by leading thinkers promoting dark green spiritualities, including Arne Naess, Joanna Macy, Ursula Le Guin, Eduardo Cohn, Karen Barad, Merlin Sheldrake, as well as several books on indigenous uprisings, ceremonies, and art. Also featured in the exhibition and gift shop were writings and artworks from Monica Sue, I probably mispronounced that, including this image depicting the goddess returning to protect the earth. And by the way, Siv Ellen Craft was talking about specific acts and campaigns of resistance the other day, and those were definitely featured there with pictures, and if I had more time, I could show you a lot more of how they were looking at these particular campaigns. Now, in DGR, I demonstrated that many photographers also promote dark green themes, including the famed Dutch photographic conservationist Frans Lanting. Through his exhibitions and this book, Eye to Eye, Lanting offered what I call eye-to-eye epiphanies. These epiphanies are when the agency and value of non-human organisms are awakened through eye-to-eye contact. When introducing Eye to Eye, Lanting explained that through his work as a photographic conservationist, he had come to see the world through other eyes. He added that he crafts his work to celebrate the kinship of all life. I surmise that scores of photographers have a similar motivation. There is, for example, an annual Wildlife Photographer of the Year exhibition that tours widely. In 2022, I visited the winners at Munich's Museum of Humans and Nature. Like Eye to Eye, these photographers provided scores of stunning eye-to-eye images. If Edmund Burke was correct that the sublime is aroused by awful and dangerous manifestations of nature, then cameras may also be technologies of the sacred. And the photographs by depicting human exploitation of animals are designed to foster empathy and pro-environmental action. Indeed, many of the photographs also seem designed to remind viewers of the sublime beauty of the world, as in this photograph titled Turtles in Paradise. Also that summer, I visited an exhibition in Berlin's Gemälde Gallery, which featured David Hockney's arboreal landscapes. It explained that the way Hockney expressed his love of trees through paintings from his North Yorkshire homeland. Hockney was quoted as saying that through his paintings he seeks to capture the essence of nature, which in his view is perpetual beauty and harmony. The exhibition also documented the way Romantic painters and even Rembrandt's landscapes shown here influenced his desire to evoke connections to nature through his art. Of course, European Romanticism has many artistic forms, is well known for expressing perceptions that many people have of nature as sublime. Taking place right now in Frankfurt, all three museums, including the Senckenberg Natural History Museum and the German Romanticism Museum, provide an in-depth exploration of the human connections to forests in Germany, past, present, and, as they see it, future. Many of the themes analyzed, and indeed that were promoted, are in sync with dark green spiritualities. One of the first exhibits in the Senckenberg, for example, sought to provide a visceral feel for the forest, with bird sounds from around the world, ironically in a room full of beautiful but dead and stuffed birds, as here. So are you having a sensory experience? Adjacent panels summarize scientific studies that show that species diversity, including bird diversity and bird song, contributes to human well-being. Another panel introduced the Japanese ritual known as Shirin-yoku, or forest bathing, which since the 1980s has been spreading globally as a sylvan remedy that promotes mental and spiritual health. Just this week, I've run into 2 people that are into this ritual process here in Germany. The museum also showed that romantic feelings toward forests lead some people to become forest defenders. The evidence included this evocative quote from Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, which was hand-painted on a sign and hung up at a forest encampment proclaiming, "The golden tree of life is evergreen." The museum also featured a documentary and book by Ursula Beeman called Forest Mind, on the interconnection of all life, which focused on indigenous people in the Colombian Amazon. Interviewing indigenous elders, Beeman sought to root forest mind in both scientific and shamanic perspectives in order to champion an ecocentric worldview and fuse empirical knowledge and ancient wisdom, including about the intelligence of plants. She also compared negatively the instrumental attitude of the European colonists, including scientists, toward the forest and indigenous peoples, whom, she averred, have a profound ecological knowledge as well as a spiritual connection to the forest. Through her documentary, the Senckenberg's curators seem to promote a spirituality of belonging and connection to nature, as well as respect for the traditional ecological and spiritual knowledge of the indigenous people of Colombia. Nearby, the Deutsches Romantik Museum has one of the great collections of Romantic art. In its part of the special exhibition, the curators asked people to consider nature as a subject and the forest as something to which you belong. They also explored recent efforts to imbue nature, including forests, with rights. This is another way of expressing ecocentric ethics in which nature has intrinsic value, as now appears in the Ecuadorian and Bolivian constitutions. Such legal innovations, as many of you know, are now unfolding in many other regions around the world. The related exhibition at the Sinclair House Museum included a video podcast about how one can get a sensual feeling for nature, for the forests, and the ways we are connected to it. The museum also offered opportunities for guided meditative forest walks. Perhaps the most obvious effort to evoke or reinforce a romantic dark green appreciation for nature was at the end of the Senckenberg's special exhibition. There, the Danish artist Jacob Steensen presented Catharsis, a cinematic video that blended sights and sounds from Northern California's redwood forests into a sublime forested soundscape. Unfortunately, I can't give you the sounds of this tonight. The video began submerged in a lively forest stream, as shown, unfortunately, here without the sound of what I just played you. Then its gaze wandered upward, revealing a terrestrial world teeming with life and sound. Eventually, as one's view slowly rises into the forested branches, the senses suggest that one is brushing through the branches and pine needles. Continuing this ascent above the top of the forest canopy, one's eyes follow birds flying over the crown of the forest, after which a clear-cut moonscape slowly emerges. I thought the presentation strategically juxtaposed a biologically diverse and intact sacred forest and a desecrated space. I first witnessed this strategy of depicting a biologically diverse and thus sacred ecosystem and a once forested land desecrated by a clear cut at slideshows presented by radical environmentalists during the 1990s. This is a good place to pause and ask, with regard to this sonically rich video, what is the artist trying to get you to think and feel? Steensen calls his approach slow media and says it is both a philosophy and a practice that uses digital technologies to draw attention to the natural world. And if ritual is what draws attention to the sacred, then what this video does is provide just such a ritual of attention, which we can again consider a technology of the sacred. Steensen seems to understand that this is indeed what he's doing when he said and wrote that via his slow media approach, he takes viewers on a meditative journey through a holistic new world. And through this media, he seeks to give audiences an overwhelming sense of communion and harmony with nature. Tellingly, his studio name is Erratic Animist, which signals his affinity with the animistic forms of dark green spirituality. It is equally telling that the curators at this important science museum resonated enough with this sensory experience that they decided to feature it in their special exhibition on forest romanticism. I surmise that they all share something of the epistemology prevalent in dark green spiritualities, namely that the best way to evoke proper spiritual perception is to get people into a biologically diverse forest or ecosystem in general. Next, we journey to Paris, where by chance, on my most recent visit, I found nature spiritualities exhibited in creative ways. These events included an exhibition titled Myths of Nature in the art of the early 20th century Finnish painter Aleksi Gallen-Kallela. The texts accompanying the painting stress how the artist was an ardent defender of wild nature. Long before the age of environmentalism, the curators explained, Gallen-Kallela criticized the plunder of nature and stressed that nature was the dynamic whole to which human beings belonged. On my way to the Gallen-Kallela exhibition, I noticed this poster and soon attended Sebastião Salgado's Aquamater photographic exhibition. The photographs were arranged within a pavilion that was modeled on habitat created by an indigenous community living along the Amazon River. The entry stressed that both the pavilion and the photographs reflect an indigenous cosmology and, above all, spirituality. What was meant by spirituality was left for visitors to surmise from the photographs. Many of the photographs depicted indigenous peoples positively, as well as their putatively animistic and nature-respectful cultures. Such positive depictions of the worldviews and environmental practices of indigenous people are increasingly provided at exhibitions around the world. Other photographs express awe and wonder in nature. suggesting again that the photographer seeks to awaken perceptions of nature as sacred, especially where nature is bioculturally diverse. Not incidentally, Salgavo's earlier 2013 large format book, Genesis, also promotes reverence for nature and respect for indigenous people, and this was featured at the Senckenberg Museum. In recent years, I've seen a veritable explosion of special exhibitions around the world that exemplify how curators fuse the arts and sciences in promoting dark green themes, including animistic perceptions. In Berlin, for example, I attended Theophany and the Bone at the Alte Münz Museum. Upon entering the museum's foyer, Theophany declared that planet Earth is blue, explaining that this is because 70% of the Earth's surface is water. The text continues, "Oceans are places of human longing, and we need the oceans, but the oceans don't need us." When it explained that through its arts, the exhibition seeks to provide a sensual experience to capture the magic of the ocean in the hope of motivating people to protect the largest habitat on Earth, which is indispensable for life on Earth as we know it. On the wall adjacent to the entry door of the theater, visitors read that Theophany provides a unique opportunity to listen to ocean sounds from Antarctica to the Arctic, which the recording artist Chris Watson had collected and orchestrated. A large map illustrated where Watson made his recordings. In a way that reflects the notion of naturalistic animism that I developed in DGR, this text listed as the cast the creatures whom Watson recorded, as well as the sounds of sound pollution that threatens marine life. By listing the sea creatures as Theophany's cast, Watson and his collaborators understood their agency and value. Watson was explicit about this when he explained that through Theophany, he sought to let nature speak for itself. After reading about the experience, Theophany's audience entered a large space with a mirrored floor. I surmise it was designed to evoke a feeling of being on ice. Then, after finding a beanbag cushion to sink into, for nearly an hour, the audience listened. At one point, it seemed that Watson had blended some of the creature's sounds into what resembled a religious choir. Meanwhile, ethereal blue lights in different colors floated around the room in a way that seemed designed to evoke a mystical feeling of immersion in the ocean at various depths and during varying conditions. After Theophany concluded, doors opened to a room with panels created by Friends of the Earth in Germany, which urged attendees to join their efforts to protect the ocean. After moving through the Friends of the Earth room, an 18-minute experience titled The Bone was offered. The Bone was created by a Chilean artist working with Norwegian scientists and writers who invited visitors to sit in a small boat and wear virtual reality headsets. The VR headsets provided an experience of flowing through the ocean currents and through kelp beds and eventually into a huge salmon skeleton. From inside the skeleton, guests listened to the voices of two salmon. Their voices followed an innovative, animistic script. The first voice spoke for salmon displaced from their native Norwegian habitat to lice-infested farms in Chile where they did not evolve and previously had never lived. This salmon expressed confusion, dismay, pain, and anger at having had their genes violently altered and at losing their freedom as humans incarcerate them in nets where they become sick and are riven with physical and psychic pain. This voice was in sharp contrast to the voice representing its wild salmon relatives in Arctic waters. The wild salmon explained that in their ancestral waters, they are in proper relationships with the other sea creatures, as well as the Sami, the indigenous Arctic people, whose salmon-themed songs provided another part of this moving sensory experience. Theophany's creatives designed the exhibition to give voice to and awaken empathy for marine life and an understanding of the intimate and respectful relationships humans should have with their oceanic relations. The lead artist made clear that her hope was to inspire a dialogue between species, presumably an imaginative one, as is much contemporary animism. Also in 2022, as it happened at the recommendation and with the eminent Koku von Stuckrad, who you all know, I attended an exhibition of the Pompidou Center in Paris that was titled Worlds of Networks. The exhibition examined technical and biological networks and the history of human insights about them. Foci included Buckmaster Fuller's Futurism, Norbert Wiener's Cybernetics, and Stuart Brand's Ecotopian Whole Earth Catalog. Its concluding section focused on biological networks, especially those examining the interconnections of forests, such as Suzanne Similard's research illuminating how mycorrhizal networks connect and enable trees to communicate in their own arboreal way. The most stunning part of the exhibition involved a video that fused a beautifully choreographed, breeze-influenced image of a tree with an imaginatively scripted arboreal voice said to be from Quercus. Here's a part of what Quercus had to say.
You probably are surprised to hear me speaking. You've always imagined us as incapable of intelligence, language, empathy. You can think of me only as a raw material to build your world. You have spent the last years and decades trying to acknowledge the rights of animals. You have extended your human privileges to them. Now, we are claiming those rights. To you, I am Quercus. I am a deciduous tree. That means I throw away my leaves during the winter. This allows me to resist the seasonal cold much better, and to live where other comrades cannot. The fact that I can get rid of parts of my body must be incomprehensible to you. You guard every inch of your body jealously, because if you lose it, you can no longer grow another. I'm throwing them away because I can rebuild everything. My body is a constant accumulation of tissues, an alternation of dead parts, wood, and living cells. There is no struggle between the living parts and the dead ones in us. Death is not an external event which we must oppose or escape. My body is with you and in your life in the most unexpected forms. I am the chair in which you sit, the table you use to write, your wardrobe, your sideboard, but also your most ordinary and extraordinary tools. We are in you as much as outside you. You just have to breathe. The oxygen that is contained in the air you inhale at any time is only a byproduct of our metabolism. And yet, it is only through this detritus of our existence that you are alive. To breathe means immersing yourself in our life and being penetrated by our aerial selves. Every breath is an intimate communion with us. Our whole body is built on the energy coming from outside of the closed system you call Earth. We get our food from the sun. For us, to build a body means to capture energy from the stars. Every tree or plant is therefore an agent of assimilation of extraterrestrial matter into Gaia's mineral body. It is only through our act of cosmic digestion that you can assimilate nutrients. I hope it is clear at this point, we fabricated the very conditions for your existence. Wood is not just dead fabric that gives structure. It is also, and above all, a historical archive of the Earth's climate. This is why we are not extraneous to your culture. We are archives of the climate that record every slight variation in the environment. We are taking notes of what you do. You just have to pay more attention to our language, the way we communicate, the way we are. Probably.
You feel like you've been to school? The Italian artist who founded Studio Forma Fantasma and produced Quercus asked the Italian philosopher Emmanuel Cosia to craft the script you just heard. Thus, Quercus not only stressed our deep relationships with trees, but that we are absolutely dependent on them. This reminded me of the German theologian Friedrich Schleiermacher, who claimed that the sine qua non of religion is a feeling of absolute dependence on a being or force greater than oneself. By giving a voice to Quercus, these Italian creatives provided another remarkable example of an animist imagination, as they insisted that humans should listen carefully to trees. I will wrap up with two museums in the Netherlands that I visited just a week ago, beginning with the De Groot Natural History Museum, which at its website entices visitors with the aphorism, "Everything is connected." This museum, like many others, emphasizes that we are related to all other living things, but it did so in novel ways. It had an unusual reference to homology. It had the usual references to homologies. Here, human hands, bat wings, and dolphin fins are shown, and their adaptive uses explained. Curators also included interactive displays demonstrating similarities between our emotions and many other animals, drawing on the science of ethology, as exemplified here in this laughing chimpanzee. The museum also brilliantly explored how organisms move, arguing that they follow just a few basic movement principles. Like Quercus, this museum drew on Emmanuel Cosi to promote respect for plant life. Adjacent displays showed how plant roots avoid toxic soils and leaves defy gravity to reach sunlight. Another image underscored our connection with trees, including that we exchange breath with them. Several displays challenged human arrogance about our supposedly superior intelligence, arguing that all organisms have their own clever wisdom about how to flourish within their habitats. Other interactive displays help visitors to understand their personal and collective planetary impacts. And as with other museums, this museum provided a scientific understanding of the circle of life. As this display put it, nature has no waste. Everything is reused in a perpetual cycle of transformation. And it had a video display of a dead fox decomposing, showing how a host of organisms made good and lively use of its body. You may recall that among the common dark green themes is the perception that death is the necessary wellspring of new life. I'd like to conclude by focusing more on death, this time at the Naturalis Biodiversity Center in Leiden in the Netherlands. The museum's exhibits began at a lower level and guided visitors eventually to a focused experience at its highest level. Its first floor began by explaining that life began in the sea while expressing kinship with all life. We are part of a wonderful world in which life is related, the text read. Every possum, kangaroo, bacteria, bat or butterfly, oleander, pony, and you. The curators also implicitly embraced intrinsic value theory with the words, every species has a special place. Then they exhorted visitors to open themselves to a meditative sensory experience. Visit the depths of the ocean with us and immerse yourself in a spectacular display of lights and sounds. This was followed by many displays of marine organisms. The next floor was devoted to evolution, and with these words, the curator stressed a common dark green theme about biological relatedness and interconnection. The text read, "Animals, plants, fungi, all life is interconnected. Because all life, past and present, is related through evolution, the process by which species emerge and adapt." The point was made in different ways. Here, visitors are urged to place their hand on this rock. Beneath the rock, the text states that life arose from non-living matter. Therefore, we're all connected even to this origin of life. The text further advanced biotic kinship by stating that every living thing comes from a single common ancestor. A nearby interactive station provided a way for visitors to discover their inner fish. This display noted that bananas share half of our DNA and chimpanzees nearly 99%, and then playfully asked, are bananas half human? The area devoted to biological diversity provided majestic displays of diverse animals accompanied by sounds of them in their habitats. But it was at the highest level of this museum that I found the most in-depth exhibits that I've ever seen at any other museum about decay and death and the circle of life. The curators began this venue by welcoming visitors to their labyrinth of death, which emphasizes death and decay as the necessary requirement for new life. As this panel concluded, we cannot live without death. Death makes room for new life. This part of the exhibit even offered consolation, noting, as the circle of life notion did in The Lion King, that all the particles that constitute us lead to life after death. There were moments when I wondered whether Elton John would soon burst into song with the famous Circle of Life song. As this panel explained, nothing is lost, for in the end, we all break down into our building blocks, into molecules, and finally into atoms. These same atoms form the basis for the creation of something new. In a religion-resembling way, in its last sentence, the display offered a meaning-filled life after death. Whatever you become, your existence is infinite. In the finale to this deathly exhibit, the circle of life was driven home via a 360-degree panorama video. It began with a beautiful meadow and forest ecosystem, gradually adding examples of predation and decay, including worms and flies working on a rabbit carcass left behind by a fox. Here is the climax to the video. Just about a little more than a minute. The background noise is just the kids and parents talking while this video went on.
Een beetje vies uit zo, hè? Dat namen. Zo, wel lekker eten voor iedereen. Kijk, die vogels, die manen dan weer lekker. Die manen worden door de vogel opgegeten.
This film suggests, I think, that we not only belong to a sacred earthly process, but also to a cosmic one. In my view, like Darwin, when at the end of On the Origin of Species, he wrote about there being grandeur in an evolutionary understanding of life, these curators offered visitors a naturalistic and indeed a dark green meaning system, I think. This, I think, would be especially appealing for those who find implausible what the world's predominant religions profess happens to us after death. And if religions help people to cope with suffering and their fears of and questions about death, then I think it's fair to say that many art and science museums are doing religious work. I leave you by returning to these questions. What do you think these curators want visitors to think and feel? If you were there, would they succeed with you? And are some art and science museums dark green? I appreciate the attention after such a long day, everyone, and I hope you found something in that of value.